Today, we're calling this Notary Signing Agent Errors 201. You may have attended our Errors 101 class that we did a few months ago. It's also on our YouTube if you haven't watched that. That's the real basic errors. The truth is the basic errors are the errors that we see every day, day in, day out. But these more advanced errors happen. And when they happen, they have big consequences. So we want to really make sure that we're aware of these errors, because being aware of them is the first step to avoiding them, right? So before we get into the actual errors, let's talk a little bit. So all NSAs are going to make errors. So there's a lot of people who will advertise on their profiles and they'll say, you know, I'm error-free, or even some signing companies will claim to be error-free. When they're trying to get an escrow agent, they'll say, oh, you're never going to get errors. That's just something we cannot promise. Even the very best notary signing agents who've done thousands of signings will make errors from time to time. A big part of the errors that we make, once you know the errors, it's not about your knowledge, right? Many of you new signing agents, you might not know what errors you're going to make. But after a while, you'll know how to complete the documents. And the big problem is overconfidence. You become good, so you think you're good, and that's when you start making errors. There's this weird trend with notaries. When they first start out, a lot of them are really good. They're the best. They make no errors because they're nervous, right? They're paranoid. They're going to make errors. So they really slow it down, triple check everything. And then after a few months, they know they're good. And that's when you start seeing errors. A notary that I have trained in the past, she was the best, and now she's been making errors. And I reached out to her, and it's just, you know, you're comfortable with it. You don't feel like you're a newbie anymore. And that's when you get kind of overconfident and can make some mistakes. So overconfidence is big in making errors and preventing them. I always tell our employees and any notaries that I trained, you want to be paranoid. You want to assume that you're going to make a mistake. So you work in a way to try to prevent that. Now, like I said, everyone's going to make errors. It's not about the error, it's how you fix it. So at a certain point, if you keep making the same errors, that is a problem. But really, they're always going to happen. So it's all about your attitude and how quickly you fix it. We all know the saying, you know, experience is the best teacher. In our industry, it's very competitive. So we don't want to make experience our teacher if we can help it. Our clients really can't afford for us to learn the hard way on the documents every time. Clients are kind of ruthless sometimes. Some of them are super sweet. I had a client the other day who notary really made a big mistake and her attitude was all off. And our client said, well, let's make sure to talk to her a little bit more and get her side of the story, because we don't want to have someone lose their livelihood because of this one signing. That's rare. That attitude is super rare. I have clients who will say, remove them from your database right now, no questions. We have to fight for our notaries a lot of times because we don't want to remove a notary simply because of a small error. It's really more about attitude, right? Because errors can be fixed. But that being said, that's why if you're a new signing agent, good job on watching these videos and attending our classes, because you want to learn from us. You want to learn from our mistakes so you don't have to. And yeah, that's just like the last point on our presentation. Instead of making the mistakes, learn from others. Now, there are going to be some notaries who are going to have to make all the mistakes themselves. I've had notaries attend all of our classes and then they've made all the errors that we've talked about. That's a tough one. We're making these videos so you don't have to make these errors. So it's going to happen. I mean, I'll even make errors that I've told you not to make, you know, so I don't want anyone to think this is us judging notaries at all, because the truth is Lisa, Eli, and I, and Hannah, our office manager, we've made all these mistakes. That's why we know how to fix them. So this isn't to judge or bash anyone. It's just to learn from their mistakes, right? We're going to view good examples of bad examples, right? So let's get right into it. So here is a common one that I have to fix all the time. It's the error on an equity payoff letter, or EPL. Let's talk about what this form is. This form is always accompanied by a deed of some sort, and typically a quitclaim deed. The purpose of that form is to take someone off title, or one of the parties on the home are releasing their interest in the property. So if the grantor is being paid off or given money in exchange for being taken off the property, there is a part on this document that will say the amount that they must be paid and the good through date, as well as a per diem. If the grantor is not receiving any funds in exchange for signing that deed, then the notary will have to have the signer put 0 on those places. Now, let's look to the right. Here's an example of an error. The document was signed and dated, which is great, but the amount of the payoff and that per diem was left blank. So most likely the notary and the signer didn't know what to put there, and so they just signed and dated it. When this happens, this will delay funding of a loan. Even if it's 0, even if the amounts are 0, it'll delay funding. And then it'll be a mad rush to try to get this signed. And this form is notarized. So it's not like I can just send this to our signer and they can fill it in. I actually have to send a notary back out. So we want to keep a lookout. Let's look at the correction for this. So when you explain the purpose of this form to the signer is going to know how to complete the form most of the time. You're going to know if by signing a deed, you're getting money, right? So when in doubt, if the signer doesn't know if they're getting money by signing a deed, check the settlement statement. That's a sneaky little trick that allows you to know how to fill this form in, or how the signer will fill it in. So in this case, this Jen McIntosh, she's getting $100,000. There's no per diem after the fact, so she put just NA there. But how did I know that? Well, go to the settlement statement under payoffs and payments. And if you look at the bottom there, it says principal balance to Jen McIntosh, $100,000. So like I said, most of the time when you explain what this form is, the signer is going to know. If it is maybe just a husband and wife, and the wife is signing the property to her husband as his sole and separate property, and she has to sign this form basically saying nothing is due to me, I'm just letting my husband, have the property in his name only, then they're going to know that that's 0. And a lot of time it is 0, but check that settlement statement to make sure, because like I said, if this form comes back blank or just signed, it's going to delay funding. It's going to delay that money getting to where it needs to go. Recently, 2 times this past month, a notary told the signer to put 0 in both of those spaces. And so the signer, just doing what the notary told them to do, put 0, and they were actually owed upwards of $100,000. So again, they were going to get their money on a Thursday. Because of this error, they got the money on a Friday. So this can delay things. So when in doubt, look at that settlement statement, ask the signer, ask for what the purpose of the deed is, read the deed and you'll see, explain what this is saying, which basically is, are you getting money in exchange for signing this deed? The signer is going to know most of the time, right? You're going to know if you're getting money or if you're not. And then from there, it's easy enough to fill out. So that's the EPL. A little more advanced, right?
Let me make a mention on something, Jenny,
sure,
on that form, because a lot of signing agents will say, I'm just there to watch people witness signatures. We're neutral, but the fact is that we're signing agents. So we want to look at the document and see, we can't presume that a signer is going to even understand the document. So for us to be able to look at the document, not just look for where they're supposed to sign, but see if there's blank spots, and ask questions, because it's a notary is one thing, a notary signing agent's a little bit different. So it is up to us to make sure that documents are filled in completely, we may not understand it, which means you have to call your contracting company. That's all I wanted to say.
Yeah, that's a great point. Thanks, Mom. Yeah, it is a great point because, we're not giving advice. We're explaining what the purpose of a form is, and we're showing them what's on the documents, right? So when I go to the settlement statement, I'm not adding that line about the signer getting $100,000. That's just what's there. So it is, when you first start out, you're going to not know all the purpose, the meaning of all the documents. And that's why our book is going to be so helpful for you guys, right? Because you're going to be able to actually look at samples and study them, because the more you understand the purpose, the easier it is to explain, and really the less work you have to do in the long run. Just explaining the purpose of the form, that'll trigger the signer's, mental faculties to understand what's going on. And yeah, when in doubt, call the person who hired you, have the signer call their agents. That's our little way out if it gets a little hairy and they're asking us things we really can't know or don't know. Okay, this one is kind of a mess. The error is dating issues. We have two different samples. These are actually real life samples of what we've had to deal with the past month. The one to the left is a Patriot Act. So there's a few things wrong on this Patriot Act. One, the signer's ID information is just blank. It's not there, right? So the notary forgot to fill that in. That's one error. This form actually requires the signer to sign, but the problem is the dates. Look at the signer's date and the notary's date. Those are the same dates, right? Yeah. So what the notary did on this is she told the signer to sign everything, and the notary dated everything for the signer. That's a big no-no. I know why she did it, because it was going to save her time. That's what she was thinking. And I actually know this agent. And what's funny is all these errors were completed by agents who have done tens, if not hundreds of signings for us. So these are not new signing agents. That's why it's like a little bit more advanced, right? So these are errors that notaries who have done it a while are making. So yeah, don't date for our signers. Let them date. If you're overbooking yourself, you need to stop doing that. If that means that you've got such a tight window of time that you can't even take the time for them to date it, you want to date it for them, it's going to come back on you. Unless you're really creative and can create a date for the signer that's different than your date, don't do it. And don't do it even if you are really creative and can sign and date all sorts of ways. Just have the signer date, right? It's going to take a little bit more time, but it'll avoid re-signs. And that's what happened on this one. The original signing was on the 3rd. They ended up re-signing on like the 13th because the signer went out of town, couldn't sign. So her funding of her loan was delayed more than 10 days because of this notary error. On top of that, it looks sloppy, right? So it looks like the notary dated here on accident to the right, and then crossed that off, initialed, and then redated. So it looks sloppy and was super funny. I mean, this file really was a mess. Oh, let me go back. This middle one was kind of funny. So it looks like the notary actually made an error on all of her dates except for this form. She actually dated everything for the 2nd, but it really signed on the 3rd. So it's just one error on top of another, right? So the simple solution is have the signer date. Look at their dates, make sure they're clean and clear. Okay, what about our example to the right? This is a right to cancel. The error here is that the dates were stamped. She has one of those date stamps, and that's how she enters her right to cancel dates. Again, this is one of actually my favorite notaries who does this, and I had to tell her to stop doing it, at least on our files. So stamped dates. So we want to avoid dating errors and issues. Never date for the signer. Just don't take the shortcut, right? I know what you're thinking, because trust me, I've done it too. Early in my career, I was like, how can I get out of here as quickly as possible? And the truth is I wanted to get out of there because I was nervous. I didn't want to be there any longer than I had to be. But when you get more confident, when you read the docs, you understand the docs, the signing will go by quick. You'll be out of there in less than an hour on 90% of your signings. And you don't need to take those shortcuts that can really bite you later on. And don't pre-print signers' dates on the right to cancel or any documents. Recently, I've seen a lot of notaries using Adobe Pro, and they're pre-typing in the signer's dates, most of the time that will require a re-sign. Lenders will not accept that. One lender, instead of re-signing, asks the notary to write a letter of explanation. But that's the best case scenario. That's not always going to happen. Most of the time, the lender will ask for a redraw. And on the right to cancel dates, you should have the signer fill those in, and you direct them to fill them in by hand. And here's a great tip, and that's why we always say to print a copy of the docs for the signer, because if the signer makes a dating error, which happens all the time, right? You think it's 2020, you're still stuck in last year's date. And so the signer kind of like overdraws it, which kind of looks ugly. Instead of having them do that, if you have an extra copy that's for the signer, you can just swap out those forms. And then you can replace the bad form with a new blank one, have that re-signed, and it looks perfect and the set looks nice and clean. We want to ensure that all dates are clean and clear and accurate. One lender is so picky, if it even looks like they made a dating error, they'll have to re-sign that form. And if it was done on the right to cancel, when they find that error, which might be 3-4 days later, their right to cancel will start over. So that can postpone funding again, upwards of a week or more. And we don't want to do that. There are rate lock extensions where sometimes we have to pay because of notary errors, which can be hundreds of dollars, even thousands of dollars, depending on the principal balance of the mortgage, right? And it can also delay other lenders being paid off, which can result in late charges for our signers' mortgages. So it's just best to babysit our borrowers, make sure their dates look clean, clear, and perfect. And if an error is made, swap it out with the borrower's copies. Always, always bring borrower's copies. Okay, let's talk about errors in printing issues. And let's talk about cutoff docs, because that was, I think, the error of the month last month. And oh boy, is it a pain to get that fixed. Let's compare some documents right here. So to the left is a real life sample of some cutoff docs. This is what printed. This is what the notary had signed. Do you even see a title of the document on this copy on the left? There's no title. How's the notary and the signer supposed to know what they're signing? The title of the document was cut off because the form was a legal size form and they printed it on letter without formatting the document properly. So if we compare the image to the right, this is how it should have printed. Oh, this is how it should have printed, where you can see the title of the document and there's a barcode at the bottom. So that is how documents were signed. How do you think that turned out? Not good, right? We had to get everything re-signed. Here's another, this is the same example. This is the note. Let's look to the images on the left. There's not even a title of the document. This is the most important form, and you don't know just from what was printed what document this is. How is that ever going to fly, right? It's not. So let's look over to the right and you can see what should have printed. That looks better. There's a title of the form, the note, there's the date, there's the loan information, and then at the bottom, there's the barcode. So they need everything. Everything that's on the PDF must be printed. And so this is a really common example of some cutoffs. That's how it's going to look. Sometimes cutoffs are not as obvious. For example, I quality controlled some docs this week, and this one lender's, their documents, when they're cut off, it almost looks fine. The signatures are there, the notarizations are there, the name of the document is there, but the barcode is missing. So it looked just a little off, and I compared with what was online, and yep, legal size was cut off. Okay, let's talk, before we go into how we can prevent that, let's talk about another error issue is drum and toner issues. Now, I don't have any real life samples because our clients don't send us the samples. They just tell us you need to get this re-signed. But these are some common examples when your toner or your drum on your laser printer is bad. So best case scenario, it's going to look like this one to the left, right, where it's just on the side of the page. That still might not fly. Lenders, escrow, counties might not accept that document. They're definitely not going to accept this, this one right next to the one to the right with all the lines through it. But believe it or not, notaries get documents signed that look like this. I don't know how on earth they think that's okay, but they do. Or what about this one to the far left here? That's really common. And then this one, the one that says toner buzz, this is a cheap toner. Sometimes when you buy a really, really cheap toner, it'll like flake off. So everything will print, but the moment you touch it, it'll kind of flake off and disappear. So these are toner issues that can happen. So let's talk about the corrections. When it comes to the toner and drum issues, you got to get to know your printer. You want to invest in a Brother or HP laser printer. There are other great brands too, but those are the ones that I've used and that we recommend getting. You have to have a laser printer, right? Do not print with ink cartridges. It's going to cost you a lot of money and it's going to slow you down. Laser printers are real fast. And the key to avoiding those ugly printer issues is purchasing high quality drums and toners, preferably genuine printer brand toner. That can be expensive though. So there are some not genuine printer brand toners that are good. You just really have to test it out. You have to buy toner, test it. If it's bad, return it. If it's good, keep it and just know that that brand is good. I've had some non-genuine toners that are wonderful. But if you're having a problem with your paper and you're trying different kinds of like off-brand toners, buy a genuine toner and it'll probably print great. So sometimes the solution is just to invest in that genuine toner. And drums really only need to be purchased like once a year. But my suggestion to avoiding having to sign those documents, because say you're in a jam, you have a signing's in an hour and your printer is printing ugly like that, looks bad, toner's bad, drum's bad. You might not have time to run to Office Max, Office Depot, Staples, wherever you go to get those supplies, right? So you want to always have a stock of toner and at least one drum handy. So maybe every year buy 2 drums, buy 1 extra toner at all times. That way you don't have to give up a signing, inconvenience a borrower, client, signing company, whoever hired you, because you ran out of toner. That happens all the time. And it's super frustrating. Now, I've not always been the best example of that. I always live on the edge on almost everything I do. I'm always using the very minimum. Same with like gas. I never fill up my tank. That's a problem, right? So don't be like me, because what that means for me is that I have to think outside of the box all the time. I have to think, okay, who has a printer? Do I have an extra printer? Can I go to my mom's? Can I go to my brother's? You want to be creative, and sometimes you have to be, but the solution is easy. Buy 2 toners when you buy your toner, right? Buy an extra toner, buy an extra drum. That way you never have to be in that bind. Or have a backup printer. So if you're me and I'm always running low on everything, I do have several printers at home. So if my main printer, that's my dual tray, that's the fastest, something's wrong with it, I have another printer in my office. And printers can be relatively cheap. The real good ones maybe cost you a few hundred, but you can buy a little brother printer for less than 100 that's really reliable. So have different means of printing in case something goes wrong with your main source of printing. Okay, what about cutoff docs? Because that is a huge error and it always results in a re-sign. A lender will never accept cutoff docs ever. First off, print using a dual tray printer. If you don't have a dual tray, there's a lot of printers will have the ability to buy a separate tray and then you can link the machine with that separate tray. But get a dual tray printer. The one I have is a Brother and it cost me maybe $200, $300. And more than that, you have to program your printer to recognize the legal size tray or that second tray. So that's just going on the little pad and making sure that it's aware that there's a second tray or a third tray, depending on the type of printer you have. And the best thing to do, even with someone who has a dual tray, because legal cutoff can happen even if you have a dual tray, is to examine the PDF that you're printing and then examine what came out of your printer. Right? So it's looking for barcodes, just like we saw in those examples. Is the name of the document there? Is the barcode at the bottom? That's how you can ensure that nothing's going to be cut off. So you really have to compare what you print with the PDF and look for those markers. That means don't just print and go. which is something that I've done in the past, which is a huge no-no, where you print the documents, you grab them, you go. I remember one signing that was like an hour away, so it wasn't close by. I did just that, right? Rolled out of bed, printed the docs, grabbed them, went in the car. And about halfway there at a stoplight, I was going through to make sure I had everything, and everything was cut off. And so really quickly, I had to find a way to improvise, which was run to a FedEx, print that out. But really, we don't want to be printing at FedEx. It costs a lot of money and it's not secure. So examine your documents before you leave the house, right? It means being present when you're printing your documents and really looking at what you're printing. All right, so here's some correction, some ways to prevent cutoff issues. This is something that Hannah from our team created. It's on every order that you have for coast to coast. It's in our special instructions that you don't have to print. It's an attachment. It's like 20 pages. It just gives general instructions and reminders and things you want to look out for. But the first page of that is this form. So if you're doing a signing for us, print that form. Make sure that all of the border is present when you print that form. If all of the border is present, then you're good to go. If something is missing or cut off, you've got a problem. You need to stop, reformat your printer and your printing settings and start over. And this is a little tip. I don't want you to do this for every signing, but what if you just ran out of your legal size paper? Or for some reason, you're having the darndest time getting your printer to print letter and legal size. If you're unable to print legal size, my screen, I have a Mac, so it might look a little different for you, but look for the section that says choose paper source by PDF page size and unselect it. It should revert your printing settings to all letter size, and it'll format the documents for that letter size 8.5 by 11 inches. So you can make it so where all the documents are in letter size. Some lenders really want you to print letter and legal, but for the most part, lenders will accept if everything's on letter as long as nothing is cut off. And that really is the key. Nothing can be cut off. So you want to unselect, choose paper source by PDF page size. And then again, when they're printed, go through the documents, make sure they look good. Also make sure they don't look too little, because sometimes a lender will scan the PDF on legal. So then when you try to make it letter size, it's like super smushed and tiny. So this will only fly if the documents aren't scanned for all legal, but it can help. So sometimes, like yesterday, for example, a notary couldn't print legal for some reason. So we made everything letter size and it printed perfectly, and now there will be no errors. So that's a little sneaky trick. Doesn't always work for lenders who want them both though. So keep that in mind. Okay, so next big error, and this is advanced. This is about split signing issues. So let's talk about what a split signing is real quick. A split signing occurs when there are multiple signers required to sign a set of loan documents, but the signers are in different areas and unable to sign together. So when this is the case, one notary will sign the first part signers and then ship the documents to the second part signer or second part notary. Docs may be shipped directly to the notary that's local to the second part signer. And then that notary will meet with the second part signers to get their portion signed. So sometimes splits are multiple parts, not just two, maybe there are 3 or 4, but for the most part, it's 2 parts that make up a split signing. This is needed when the lenders require all signers to sign the same set of documents. So very few lenders will accept what we call counterpart documents, where, say, me and my husband, we're in different states. I sign my own set and he signs his own set, and then they marry them together when they arrive at escrow. Few lenders will accept that. For the most part, all documents must be signed by the signers, that same exact set of documents. So that's when a split signing will result. Let's look at some errors for splits. Now, errors on splits are a given. If there are no errors, it is very odd, and it's probably because we've babysat the files and we're in close communication with the signers and with the notaries, and we really coordinated it. If you let a split signing just go free, you're going to get errors, and you're going to get bad errors. Here are some common examples of errors that are going to happen. To the left here, we have a signature page of a note, the first part signer signed, and the notary crossed off the second signer's signature line. Why this happens, I don't really know. I think that notaries will think, well, that signer's not here, so cross them off. You can't do that, right? You can't do that. That signer is going to need to sign. And if the lender sees this, they're not going to accept the documents. And the worst case scenario is the second part signer will get the docs and they'll be like, what am I supposed to sign? Everything's crossed out. You might be able to write the signer's signature line back in, but that might not fly. So if you are the first part of a split signing, leave all signature lines alone. You don't need to cross any signature lines out. Only your notarizations. We'll go into that a little bit more. To the right is a notarization. So what will oftentimes happen with split signings is that the second part signer just won't notarize anything. The second part notary will not see any blank, clean notarizations, so they won't notarize anything. Or they'll do what we've shown here, where, okay, first part signer notarized, crossed off the name, which is acceptable only on the notarizations. And then the second part notary said, well, I'll just handwrite a notarization and stamp it. Or even worse, sometimes they'll just stamp the form. They won't even sign it or write anything. Now, even though legally, if they write everything out according to what their state notarizations require, it's acceptable, the county might not accept it and the lender might not accept it. So let's talk about how we can do this right instead of wrong. So a quick overview. Loan docs generally only provide one set of notarial certificates for the notary to complete. So when we have multiple notaries handling multiple parts, one of the notaries in the split must provide loose notarial certificates. So one person in the split has to print some loose acknowledgments and jurats. And it's a good idea to keep some loose acknowledgments and jurats in your notary bag all the time, but especially for a split, make sure you print those out. Now, another common mistake is that first part notary, they'll ship the docs to the wrong place. So if you're the first part in a split, those docs need to now go to a second part signer or a second part notary. So that means you have to really verify the label and look at it. What'll happen a lot of times is that the first part notary will ship the docs right back to escrow. And now there's another maybe 1 or 2 day delay because the docs went to the wrong place. And then, like we mentioned, don't cross off any signature line of the signer who's not present. You may only correct the names on the notarial certificates. Okay, let's look at what that will look like. So here's a good example of how a split needs to go when it comes to signing and notarizing. So we have 2 signers, one signed on March 10th, the other signed on March 12th. No signature lines were crossed out, right? Nice and clean, dated correctly. And here's the notarization. So in this case, the first part notary used the pre-printed certificates. They crossed out the second part signer who did not appear before them's name, which is totally acceptable. And then the second part notary added a loose all-purpose acknowledgement. So one of the notaries has to add a loose all-purpose acknowledgement or a jurat. It doesn't matter who. Our preference is if you're the first part notary, you be courteous and add an all-purpose acknowledgement and leave the second part to have those pre-printed notarizations. That just ensures that the signing is going to go smooth. I'll sometimes handle split signings if I'm worried that it's going to get messed up, or absolutely if it's a correction. Recently, I had to correct a split signing. So I was the first part, and I didn't use the pre-printed notarizations because I don't know what the second part notary knows. As you guys know, there's not a lot of regulation in this industry. So that notary could know nothing about split signings. So because I know something about split signings, I add those acknowledgements and even put a note saying, this is for the second part notary to fill in. Right? So that's the real courteous thing to do. But regardless, always bring extra acknowledgements and jurats to split signings because one party is going to need them. And I'm courteous, so I always want to make sure that the second part gets to use the pre-printed stuff. And that's really where when you've been doing this a while and you've done these, and we're going to give you that information, you want to think of not just your portion of the signing, but the success of the signing as a whole. So like we said, we don't know what that next notary knows. So we want to foolproof it, right? We want to make sure that that notary cannot make an error because we've laid it out for them in a really nice way. When you do that, you make partners. Go ahead.
There's a couple of good questions I thought I'd bring out real quickly on the split signing.
Sure.
Somebody had said, are there detailed instructions with the documents? No, usually not. All you'll know is that your order may say, you know, Smith part 1 or Smith part 2. And so you need to know how to do split signings because no one's going to tell you unless you ask. And the instructions that Virginia is giving you, that this is it. This is the training you get. The only time, because we often have notaries that will, and I think Ginny probably brought it up, that will see the names. As Ginny's showing, just cross out the person that's not there. Don't cross the signature line out. Some signing agents actually do that. Cross the signature line out. And then one of the questions is, when does the right to cancel start? It starts from the top date is always the date of the first signer who signed, and the rescission date is the 3 days, business days of the second signer.
We actually have a sample of that coming up too.
Okay, good. All right, then you can keep going.
Yeah, very good. Let's go over that right to cancel. Split signing correction. So the right to cancel will really depend on the type of form that's used. So generally there's 2 ways that right to cancels will come to you. One, where the signatures are on, both signatures are on one page. And that's where we're going to follow what Lisa said. So when the right to cancel has both signatures on one page, the top date is the date of the first signing that takes place. So in this example, the first signing took place on 3/10/2021, and that's the date that needs to be at the very top. In this case, the right to cancel date, the actual rescission date, needs to correspond with the second signer's signing date. So the second signer signed on March 12th, 2021. The right to cancel for that date was 3/16/2021. So again, if the right to cancel has both signatures on one form, the top date will correspond to the first signing date, and the actual right to cancel date will reflect when the second part signs or the last part signs. Now, the other way that you'll have it is a lot easier, is when each signer has their very own right to cancel. So in this case, the signatures are on different pages. When that is the case, you're just going to fill out the right to cancel like you normally would. So in this case, Jane signed on the 10th of March. March 10th goes at the very top, and the right to cancel for March 10th was March 13th. So split right to cancels can be complicated if the signatures are on one page, both signatures are on one page. So you want to remember top date, first signing, second date will reflect the second signer's signing date. But if they have their very own right to cancel, it's easy. Just do it like you normally would. And that's a really good note that Lisa brought out that question. It's very rare that you're going to get nice, clear instructions for split signings. Maybe a escrow agent with a small desk, meaning that they don't have a ton of work, so they can take the time to make sure every signing is perfect. We'll do that. I know at Coast to Coast, we have someone on our team, Crystal, and she focuses in on splits. And so part of her day, she goes through and makes sure they all look perfect. You're not going to get much instructions. So that's why you attending this class is so great, because you're going to know how to do it. And that's why splits need to be monitored so closely, because there's not a lot of instructions. Notaries aren't trained on splits outside of what we do. Very, very rare. I have not seen it in any other training programs. And there's just prone to be issues. If we're not on it and making sure that each notary knows what they're doing and ships the docs correctly, there's going to be errors. So they are complicated, but you shouldn't avoid them. You know, watch this video and go do a split. You'll be fine. And then, like Lisa said, ask questions, communicate. Okay, next up, power of attorney loan signings. These can be difficult, but first let's talk about what a POA is. So a power of attorney is a legally binding document that grants a specified person over an individual's assets, medical decisions, in the event that the individual is not present for some transaction or is incapacitated. In cases where the signer is unavailable to conduct business, sometimes a power of attorney can be used on a loan signing. So if a signer is unable to attend the signing, maybe they're out of the country or something happened to them physically where they cannot sign their loan documents, a power of attorney might be used. Power of attorneys must always be approved by the lender prior to the signing, and docs need to be drawn up specifically for that power of attorney. So if you go to a signing and you see that the signer is unable to sign, maybe they broke their arms or hands and they cannot sign, or there might be a variety of reasons. You can't just say, well, hey, do you have a POA? Let's do that. That had to have already been pre-approved by the lender. So yeah, don't just go to a signing and come up with that. You can suggest to the lender once you know. So if that happens, you can call and say, hey, I don't think this is going to happen like this. The borrower does have a POA. Maybe the docs need to be drawn up for that and approved. But it's your job as the signing agent to make sure that the POA signs and initials exactly as is required, and that your notarizations are completed properly. So it's really your responsibility to make sure that the docs are signed right. And let's take a look at what this could look like. So here is an error. There's several errors on this document. The very top, the POA signs their name only. So look at the signature line. The signature line says Eli Acharabel by Virginia Acharabel, attorney in fact. And the way that we signed it was just my name, POA. Sometimes this will be signed just one name. That's wrong. That's not how you do it. The second error here is that the person notarized Eli Acharabel. So read the acknowledgement, right? The acknowledgement says personally appeared. So did Eli personally appear? No, Virginia personally appeared on behalf of Eli as his power of attorney. And then the third error is the initials here. So we just have Virginia's initials, right? My initials here. So let's look at this. Let's see how it should have been signed. Okay, so here is the correction. So the power of attorney must sign exactly as the signature line reads. Both names need to be signed for, not just printed. So let's look at our example. In cursive, signed for Eli. So the POA actually has to come up with a signature for the principal. By, then the notary sign, or the power of attorney signs their normal signature, and then comma, attorney in fact. And they can print attorney in fact, or they can sign for it. But all of that needs to be signed for. Now, as for your notarization, like we discussed, we have two options. One is you put the person who appeared before you. So that's the power of attorney. So in this case, that would be my name. Or you can print the entire power of attorney verbiage. And that's like in our example right below. So you could put Eli Acharabel by Virginia Acharabel, attorney in fact. In fact, some counties prefer that. I've had some post-closing errors where the county rejected just the name and they wanted the entire verbiage. But really, legally, both ways are acceptable. Now, last little note is the initials. So initials for power of attorney are the principal's initials by the power of attorney, AIF, attorney in fact. So that's how it needs to look right there. When it comes to power of attorney signings, similar to split signings, if you're not coaching the notary and making sure that this gets done properly, they're going to send it back incorrectly. And when that happens, best case scenario, so what if, like in this example right here, they just sign the name, get rid of that POA. If they just sign the name, then best case scenario, we can ship those docs back to the notary. The notary can go back to the borrower or the power of attorney, and they can add in the rest of the verbiage. They can sign for Eli and then by Virginia, attorney in fact. But worst case is we're getting it all re-signed and everything needs to get redrawn and re-signed. So
one other point too is that when you have like in your case of Virginia's example, it's Eli is the borrower. But let's say Virginia also is a borrower. So she's signing on behalf of her husband and she's signing for herself. That signature that she uses when she signs Eli a Cherubel by Virginia a Cherubel, that Virginia a Cherubel signature has to match the signature she puts on her own line. And sometimes signers don't know that. They think it can, as long as it's cursive, it's fine. But if they're an actual principal on the document, signatures must match.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah, so if my signature is actually a symbol, right? It's just like a big loopy symbol. And that's how I sign everything else. That's how I need to sign my signature line, or it might get rejected. So they're definitely a pain, but you can do it successfully. The key is to copy what the signature line says. And even on documents that don't have a pre-printed signature line, if you've been signing as power of attorney, you have to keep signing that way throughout the entire set. So like this is a W-9 and a loan application. It doesn't say the name, right? It doesn't have that full verbiage. Continue signing the exact same way throughout the set, just like this. So something that's helpful and what I've done in the past is on a sticky note, have the signer sign that entire verbiage and place that sticky note right in front of them and tell them to sign that way throughout the entire set. So it gives them something to copy because it can get complicated and it's kind of frustrating. So you might want to do that for a signature and an initial and just point to that document and say, sign exactly like this throughout the set. And then when you get the documents back, look at the forms. Does it look weird? Is it off? Is it wrong? Use their borrower's copy and swipe it out and use a nice clean set. I've done power of attorneys that I've had to go back 3 times because we got it wrong every single time. So it's possible to do it right the first time. It just means slowing it down, having your borrower's copies. And like I said, having that little sticky note that provides them instruction is a great way for them to focus on how they need to sign throughout the entire set. Okay, so we're going to briefly talk about some shipping errors and issues and then how we can prevent them by having some corrections. So the error, swapping labels, this has happened a lot this week and by very experienced notaries. So notaries who are some of our favorites are doing this. And what is happening? They give FedEx the package and the label and they let FedEx package them for you. So when packaging documents, you really have to be present and pay attention. You want to package one set at a time. So say you're a busy notary, you did 5 signings that day. You take that set of docs, you look at where it goes to, and you make sure that that label matches it. The settlement statement will have the company of where the documents will go to, 99% of the time. And you package the sets one at a time. Never, ever, ever let the shipping facility package it for you because they will swap the labels. And what will happen is, best escrow will get first class escrows documents. And then we have to coordinate a shipment. Someone has to pay for another label because 2 labels were used incorrectly. So that costs money, right? Anywhere from $5 to $20 per label. And there's just delays. And escrow agents are frustrated. And you're lucky if you can get both of them coordinated correctly. I've had one escrow company is super diligent, ships the docs back to where they belong. The other one holds onto them for a week because they're not their docs. Why do they care, right? So you have to be present. You have to pay attention. One set at a time. And if you're running late, slow it down. And that's why not overbooking yourself is so critical. What about docs being held too long? This happens also every week. Week after the signing, escrow's like, where are our docs? This was supposed to fund yesterday. We need originals. We call the notary. This is what always happens. We call the notary. They don't pick up, but we text and we email. And then an hour later, I see the packages tracking. So what happened was they forgot about those docs. They dropped them. They shipped them, but they didn't say anything. And I know they didn't say anything because they're like, oops, better ship these out. but that's super frustrating for us, right? So just say something, take the call, answer the text, explain what happened, which is most of the time, I forgot the docs in my office. They're in the trunk of my car. They're in my scanner. I'm so sorry. Let me get them out. Don't just go MIA. If you have held onto a set of docs, scan them back immediately once you figure out you still have them, because the lender might be able to fund off of a scan. So you might be able to save the funding based off of a scan. So if you hold docs too long, which happens to all of us, happened to me the other day, so embarrassing because I tell you guys not to do it and I did it myself, but it happened the other day. So I scanned the docs. I told everyone, I shipped them out. It's the best I can do, right? You've made a mistake. We're going to make mistakes, but don't put your docs in a place you're not going to find them, right? Don't put them in the trunk of your car. Don't put them on your dining table if you never sit at your dining table, right? Put them in your notary bag, put them in a secure location. After the signing, ship them out or do it the following day. Set reminders. It means being organized, but you can do it. It takes a little time out of your schedule and you make sure you don't make any errors. And what about docs being opened in transit? So this happens when notaries use cardboard packages, those thin letter-sized cardboard packages. They can open up in transit. So my suggestion, and we've mentioned it in the last 3 classes, is to use those polyurethane packs. They're the plastic packs that are letter size, but they're a little bigger, so they're not going to bust open. And if you're real paranoid, you might tape the closure closed. You don't want to like duct tape it so the whole package is duct tape. Escrow will get frustrated at that because now they have to figure out a way to get that package open. But just one strip of tape, that's going to secure the package. It's not necessary, but if you're worried the package is going to open, maybe there's only cardboard packages at the location you went to, then put some tape on it to make sure it doesn't open. Because when they're opened in transit, good luck getting those back. They are somewhere in FedEx in a pile of their lost documents. And the repercussions, someone's going to have to pay for credit monitoring because borrowers are not happy that their personal information is out. And most of the time that means us or escrow. Nobody wants to do that. Credit monitoring can cost $200 to $600. So think about that. Package them correctly and make sure that they're sealed. I actually almost did that the other day. I packaged a set and I was just about to give that set to the person at FedEx and I realized I didn't seal it. So be present. Again, be present when you're doing it. Take the time, one package at a time. And missing documents. So this happens from time to time where you'll scan a set of docs and you'll leave some of them in your scanner. And generally I can tell when that happens. So because maybe like the last half of the docs didn't arrive. So before you leave, slow it down. That means doing things deliberately, not overbooking yourself. And before you ship them, that's your final chance to quality control them, right? Make sure you have everything. Make sure everything is in order. Make sure page 1 of the deed of trust is with all the other pages of the deed of trust. Documents are going to go missing at escrow from time to time. There's nothing we can do about that, right? Unless we scan every single set, there's nothing we can do about from time to time escrow missing the packages or losing a document, which does happen. But we can cover ourselves and know by just our good practice that we've made sure that all the documents are in there. All right. And lastly, when an error is made. So again, all signing agents are going to make mistakes. It's not about the error. It's about how you fix it. So don't get defensive. You don't have to grovel. Just own your mistake and take the measures needed to fix the problem. Remember that error corrections have deadlines. So you want to stop what you're doing and get that correction fixed immediately. Most of the time, you're going to be informed by email of an error, maybe a call, text, or email, probably all 3. Make sure you understand the error you made and how to correct it and follow instructions thoroughly. One of our newer notaries this week, we went over the error. She didn't understand it and got it done wrong. And then it required a 3rd trip to the signer. So slow it down, maybe confirm, reiterate what they want done. Make sure we're all on the same page. We want to get that done right the 2nd time and be done with it. And remember that all error corrections will require a scan of the correction. So doesn't mean you have to get a scanner in your office, but use your smartphone, download a mobile app like Tiny Scanner, CamScan, Genius Scan, Adobe DC, and scan from your phone. They all require a scan. And this is a tip from our quality control manager, is to treat the error the way you would a new order. So keep the contracting company in the loop. Provide real-time updates of how the correction is coming along, when the scan will be received, and when the docs arrive at FedEx. And communicate every step of the way. So a client might be mad that there was an error on the documents, but at the end of the day, when the error has been corrected timely and you are communicative, you might actually get an advocate. That happens all the time. Notary, I'm super frustrated. I have to fix this error. And the notary's like, yeah, I'm on it. I'll fix it. They get it done right away. I love that notary now. I'm going to keep giving that notary work. It's all about how quickly you can do it, your attitude, and work to prevent the errors as much as you can, slowing it down, triple checking your docs.